Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
I can, thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call Miss Bogerd, please?
Yes, of course.
Repeat after me. I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's lovely. Thank you.
Good morning, Miss Bogerd. My name is Jason Beer and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you tell us your full name, please?
Angela Margaret Vanden Bogerd.
You've provided two detailed witness statements to the inquiry, for which many thanks, and thank you for attending to give evidence today. Before we get into the detail of those two witness statements, I think there's something that you wanted to say, is that right?
It is, thank you, if I may. Saying sorry and no doesn't change what's happened, but I do want to say to everyone impacted by wrongful convictions and wrongful contract terminations that I am truly, truly sorry for the devastation caused to you, your family and friends. I hope my evidence will assist this inquiry with getting to the answers you and so many others deserve. Thank you, Mr. Beer.
Thank you. Can we look at the two witness statements, please? The first is 114 pages long, dated the 20th of March 2014, and the URN, if we can display it, please, is WITN 0990-0100. I think there are 7 corrections that you wish to make to that statement. Can we start with the first of those, please, which is page 21, paragraph 36. I think there's an addition that you would like to make to the end of paragraph 36 to insert the following words: further disclosure, poll 0014-2481 and poll 0017-8171 shows I initiated the provision and analysis of the horizon logs in respect of the unexplained loss at the branch. So I'll read that back without the two URNs. Further disclosure shows I initiated the provision and analysis of the horizon logs in respect of the unexplained loss at the branch. Is that right?
That's correct, thank you.
The Second Amendment, page 31, please. Paragraph 62. In line 8. Which reads, "This was the first time I had ever attended an interview with a sub-postmaster." I think you want to add the words of this type of after the words attended, so that it reads, "This was the first time I had ever attended this type of an interview."
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Thank you.
Page 38, please. Paragraph 77. Line 7. The date, the first date, I think you would like to amend 10th of March 2012 to 10th of May 2012. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Page 65, please. Line 1. I think you would like to delete the words as the terms of reference have not been disclosed,
That's correct, 'cause I've seen them since I put this together.
so that it would read, from memory, the purpose of Project Sparrow was to oversee.
Correct.
Page 104, please. Paragraph 223B, which is at the foot of the page. I think you would like to add the words "from memory" at the beginning of the paragraph, so it reads, "From memory, my involvement."
Correct.
And then at the end of the paragraph, add the following words: "However, further disclosed documents show I was involved in discussions regarding overlaps between witness statements."
That's correct. Thank you.
Page 109, please. At paragraph 229, at the end of the paragraph, I think you would like to add the words "further disclosure shows me raising my concerns to Andrew Parsons of Womble Bond Dickinson."
Correct.
So further disclosure shows me raising my concerns to Andrew Parsons of Womble Bond Dickinson. Can you turn to the final page of the witness statement, page 114? Is that your signature?
It is, yes.
And with those corrections brought into account, are the contents of that witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. Can we turn to the second witness statement, which is 7 pages long, WITN 0990-0200. I think there's one correction you would like to make to that, which is on page 6. Paragraph 16. And I think you would like to delete the words starting 3 lines from the bottom, "whilst I cannot,"
Correct.
right until the end of the paragraph.
That's right.
So all of that page from "whilst I cannot" and then over the page to the words "the scheme."
Correct.
And instead insert the words "helpline calls were not audio recorded at the time, it was the call logs that were used for the scheme investigations."
That's correct. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Beer, there are 2 sentences ending with scheme. There's the first line and the third line. Where do I stop deleting? Is it the whole, is it right to the end or the first scheme?
It's to the end, sir.
Fine. And could you just tell me again what the correction includes by way of additional words?
Yes, helpline calls were not audio recorded at the time. It was the call logs that were used for the scheme investigations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is that your signature on page 7?
It is, yes.
And are the contents of the witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief with that correction brought into account?
They are, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. That can come down. Can I start, please, with your career at the post office? You had an extensive career at the Post Office spanning some 35 years, is that right?
That's correct.
You first joined the Post Office in 1985 straight from school, is that right?
Yes.
You began as a Post Office counter assistant, so working the counters, and were a person who rose up through the organisation, holding, in the end, numerous managerial roles, is that right?
That's correct.
Can I outline your career path as I've understood it? In summary, as follows. You were a counter assistant between 1985 and 1987.
Correct.
You were a branch manager between 1987 and 1996.
That's correct.
You were a retail network manager between 1996 and 2001.
Correct.
You were the head of area for the rural agency in Wales between 2001 and 2005.
Correct.
You were the general manager for the community network of branches between 2005 and 2006.
Correct.
You were the national network development manager between 2006 and 2009.
Yes.
You were the network change operations manager between 2009 and 10.
Correct.
You were head of network services between 2010 and 2012.
Yes.
You were head of partnerships between 2012 and 2013.
Yes.
You were program director for the branch support program between 2013 and 15.
Correct.
You were director of support services between 2015 and 16.
Yep.
You were people and change director between 2017 and 18.
Correct.
You were people services director in 2018.
Yes.
And you were the business improvement director between 2018 and 2020.
That's correct.
Given the length and breadth of your career, do you accept that you had extensive contact with and an understanding of the position of sub-postmasters?
I did, yes.
Do you agree that you lived through the development, the rollout of Horizon?
Yes, I accept that.
You lived through the rollout of the Impact Programme?
Sorry, the Impact Programme.
Do you not remember the Impact Programme?
No.
2005.
I'm not familiar with the Impact Programme.
Do you accept that you lived and worked through the move to Horizon Online in 2010?
Yes, I did.
The production of the ISME report in 2010?
Yes.
The production of the Detica report and the Deloitte reports?
Yeah, seen that, yeah.
All of the prosecutions of sub-postmasters based on evidence produced by Horizon happened when you were...
Yes, I wasn't involved in those, but yes, they happened during my time.
You were involved intimately in the second site in initial investigation?
Yes.
And with the mediation scheme?
Yes.
And you were extensively involved in the group litigation?
Yes.
Do you accept that your managerial roles permitted and indeed required you to raise issues faced by sub-postmasters to senior management and then latterly to the board?
When I became aware of them, yes. In terms of the board, whether it was directly by myself, probably not, but via my reporting line.
And who was your reporting line?
It depends at what time. So my reporting line, in terms of managerial roles, tended to be Sue Huggins, Kevin Gilliland, Al Cameron, and then my last role was reporting into Joe McLeod.
So if we just go through, when you were head of partnerships in 2012 to 13, who was your reporting line?
I believe that was Kevin Gilliland.
Programme director for the branch support programme 13 to 15?
I think that was Kevin again.
Director of support services 15 to 16?
Sorry, that was Al Cameron.
People and change director 17 to 18?
So I had a dual reporting line, Al Cameron and Martin Kirk, who was the HR group director at the time.
People Services Director in 2018?
Al Cameron.
And Business Improvement Director 18 to 20?
Joe McLeod.
And so you wouldn't have had direct access to the board, is that what you're saying, but through each of those reports, indirect access?
So what used to happen is that if you took anything to the board, you would normally have a sponsor who was an executive director, and that would have been my reporting line. But I would be called sometimes just to give updates. So on the branch support programme, for instance, I might be called to go and give an update on the paper. But normally your exec director as the sponsor would introduce you into that session, and you would take over and update through the paper.
How many times did you attend the board?
Over my length of career, I wasn't a regular attendant at board. So we had the board, and then below that we had the executive team. So I would probably have spent more time updating the executive team and occasionally go to board for whatever I was doing at the time. So there were other things I would have updated board on because I was involved in other things other than what we've discussed as well.
How many times do you think you attended the board?
I'd say between 10 and 20 over the length of my career, probably. I can't be exact.
You left the post office in May 2020, is that right?
That's correct.
And you describe leaving the post office in your witness statement. If we can turn that up, the first one, it'll come up on the screen.
Okay.
Page 110, please. Foot of the page, please. Paragraph 233. You say, with the settlement being reached in the group litigation in December 2019, my role came to an end. As a result, I was made redundant. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can we look, please, at PVEN 50280? And over the page, please. This is a copy of text messages exchanged between you and Paula Venables in May 2020. And can you see that the one at the top is Ms. Venables asking you how you are and what lockdown is like for you, yes?
Yes.
And then your reply is at the foot of the page. Hi, Paula, good to hear from you. We're all keeping well, thank you. I hope you are too. Lockdown has been 24/7 working on COVID-19 crisis management for me in recent weeks. However, I leave the post office on Monday, just finalising the details of my agreement, and it's not common knowledge in work yet, but the time is right for me to leave. The last year has reinforced that for me. Don't know what I'll do going forward, but I'm looking forward to pastures new. I'm glad some things I've said have been useful for you. Take care, etc.
Yes.
You say it wasn't common knowledge in work that you were leaving, but the time is right for you to leave. The last year has reinforced that for you. It seems from this that it was what had happened in the previous year that was relevant to your decision to leave. Is that right?
That's correct.
In that time, the post office had lost the Common Issues trial. Mm-hmm. The post office had lost the Horizon Issues trial. The post office had failed successfully to appeal to the Court of Appeal. And the post office had reached a settlement of over £50 million with the group litigation claimants. You had been significantly and deeply criticised by a High Court judge.
Yes.
Were those relevant to your reasons for leaving?
Not really. It was what came after that.
What came after that?
So I think, just to set the context, so the only, when I moved into the branch business improvement role, that was the first time that I'd been exclusively working on that role. So throughout the whole of my career, including the investigations of second sight at the start, the scheme, that was in addition to my day job. So it was additional responsibilities. So when I moved into the business improvement role, that was full-time supporting the GLO. So technically, when that ended, my role was redundant, but I didn't leave straight away because that was in the December and I left in the May. So after the settlement, then I was asked then to look at the Horizon Shortfall Scheme, what that would look like. And I spent some time working with the lawyers. It would have been HSF at that time. And I think, for me, I got a bit disillusioned in as much as we had settled, and therefore my view is we should now push on and deliver what we said we would, which is the Horizon Shortfall Scheme, as quickly as we should. And it just wasn't happening. And
Why wasn't it happening?
Because there was lots of discussions around what that should look like, how long it should take, and I just got very disillusioned. I mean, so my comment to the business at the time was that the Horizon...
Sorry, the document can come down, and can you move forward slightly and make sure those two microphones are angled towards your mouth?
Okay, is that better?
A bit better, if you can keep your voice up.
Okay, I'll try. Sorry, I do tend to drop my voice, so just let me know and I'll raise it. So
you said that you said to, and then I missed who you said it to.
So it was a general conversation within the business. I said, the success would be measured by how quickly we pay out compensation, how much compensation we pay out, and how little we spend on solicitor costs in doing that. And I was concerned that all of that was reversed, so we were spending quite a lot of money on solicitor costs, and we weren't progressing applications through that scheme as quickly as we should. So by the time I left in the May, no payments had been made, and we weren't any further forward. So I just got very disillusioned with, I suppose, the intent of the business to resolve what we'd agreed that we would do.
And who was driving the intent of the business to not do the three things that you've identified?
I'm not really sure, because the lawyers were heavily involved at the time. It just didn't seem to get the traction I thought we should have. So my view was, we'd come through the very difficult trials. We'd agreed the settlement, and therefore we accept that's the position, and we should move on and do what we should do as quickly as we should.
So it wasn't the loss of the trials and the criticisms of the judge that prompted you to leave. It was disillusion with the Post Office delivering on its commitments.
For me, personally, yes. I mean, I had a conversation with Paula before we went into the trials that I was thinking of leaving the business. And that was because I felt at the time I was being pigeonholed into the litigation, and I wanted to explore other things from a career perspective. So it wasn't something I hadn't discussed previously, but at that time Paula had asked me to stay because of my extensive knowledge of the business and the fact that I'd been close with the initial investigation with Second Sight and the scheme. So I agreed to stay, but it was just that it was a personal thing for me. As you say, we weren't delivering on what we said we would as quickly as I thought we should do.
Did the revelations made by the Horizon Issues judgment not have any impact on you in terms of your career and decision to leave at all? The fact that for the first time a person in authority, a High Court judge, had found the existence of, say, 30 bugs, errors and defects that either had or had the potential to cause shortfalls, a fact that the Post Office had been denying for decades, have some impact on you?
I think, well, that was obviously the final position, but I think as we went through the GLO, it was obvious as we were going through that things were, in terms of what I was seeing, there was stuff that I wasn't aware of before. So for me, it was kind of, we were on that journey anyway. The extent of the judgments, I think, was a surprise. But having gone through the whole process, and I did attend the 2 trials every day, but, so I could see that coming together as they went through. So it wasn't a complete revelation, but that wasn't the reason for me leaving the business. From my perspective, it wasn't my reason. It was the fact that, we just weren't delivering on what we said we would deliver. And I felt quite strongly about that.
Even though you had been directly involved in the second site initial investigation and in the mediation process, neither of which had uncovered the bugs, errors and defects that the judge found to have existed. That didn't have any impact on you at all.
Well, I wish we had uncovered it, but the evidence from our investigations, the evidence just wasn't there to support it. But what I wasn't aware of, and my team weren't aware of at the time, was the amount of so the known error logs, for instance. What we weren't aware of known error at the KELS at the time. So those things came out later, as we were in the GLO process.
I think that's one of the 5 main things you say in your witness statement. I'm going to summarise your witness statement, if I may. Firstly, I think you make no concessions or admissions that you did anything wrong, correct?
Well, I didn't knowingly do anything wrong, and I would never knowingly do anything wrong.
You don't apologise for your role in any of the events being examined by the inquiry, do you?
I think, and I've reflected on this quite a bit, and the disclosure that I've seen through this process, there are things that, documents that I've seen that I don't remember some of them from the time, but clearly, knowing what I know now, I would give further weight to some of those documents than I did at the time. So they would have more significance. So things that I might have missed at the time, then I really regret that, and I wish I'd been able to see that back then.
But still, knowing what you know now, in your witness statement, you don't apologise for anything that you did wrong, do you?
I apologise for not getting to the answer more quickly, but with the evidence I had and the parameters of my role at the time, I did the best I could and to the best of my ability.
What you say is you blame Fujitsu for not being transparent with you and the post office.
And yes.
That's the third thing you say. You lay the blame at Fujitsu's door.
Well, from my perspective, because we'd set up the mediation scheme. We had reached out to Fujitsu in terms of being able to get the information from them for us to be able to do the investigations. They put a project manager in place that we funded to be able to get us access to the information that we needed. They knew what we were doing, yet we didn't get sight of any KELS. Now, I didn't know KELS existed, and nobody that we were working with in the business knew that at the time. What I've subsequently seen through the disclosure, and what some of this did come out as we were going through the GLO process, is that there were people within the organisation...
Within the post office?
Within the post office, that were aware of, I presume, known error logs, but I'm just talking about the service management kind of department, where they would be dealing with Fujitsu at that level on a daily basis and working that through. Now, that wasn't available, and I certainly wasn't aware of that when we were going through the scheme. That's
the fourth thing you say. The first you knew about known error logs, KELS, was in the course of the group litigation.
Yes.
But when in the course of the group litigation?
I'm not really sure, but and it wasn't the detail of the KELS; it was more KELS. So as Andrew Parsons particularly was preparing the case and bringing papers to, I think it was the PLSG, then that's probably the first time, and we started to have some queries coming in from the legal team into me and then out to my team to be able to go and find some information on it. But that was the first time. But I really can't put a date on it.
You say, lastly, that you had no knowledge of any material bugs in the Horizon system until the second site investigation reported in July 2013.
So at the point we were feeding information to second site for the construction of that interim report, then we disclosed 2 bugs. And that was a surprise to me. I wasn't aware of those up until that point.
Can I, before we get into the detail, just look at some of the language you use? Go back to your witness statement at paragraph 29 on page 14, please. It'll come up on the screen. The top paragraph, which is paragraph 29, and the word before memory on the previous page is from. You say, from memory, Second Sight were putting together their report, and the legal team said that they had been made aware of a couple of anomalies which they needed to disclose. This was the first I'd heard of any bug, so it was a surprise, which is what you've just told us there.
Yeah.
And then looking down the page, paragraph 30, about 3 or 4 lines from the bottom. We scroll a little further, 5 lines in fact. As mentioned in the paragraph above, it was only when the Post Office disclosed to Second Sight that there were 2 anomalies within Horizon in 2013 that there was any suggestion that the system was not foolproof. But even then, a rational explanation was provided by IT experts. You refer in this statement in a number of places, as we've seen here, to anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
Did you choose that word because you wanted to characterise bugs, errors and defects in Horizon as something which is odd, peculiar or strange, i.e. the definition of the word anomaly?
No, it was simply that was the word used at the time. So when I think it was Simon Baker was involved and brought that to my attention, and I say the legal team, I think it was Andy Parsons and Rod Williams, that was the conversation. It was just the word that was used at the time.
Do you remember a diktat that the word anomalies should be used?
Sorry, I missed that question.
Yeah. Do you remember a diktat, an instruction, a suggestion that the word anomaly should be used?
No.
Over and above bugs, errors and defects?
No.
Can we look, please, at poll 00380985? We can see this is an email from Paula Venables to you at about this time, July 2013. We can see you're on the distribution list there, in which he says, my engineer, computer literate husband sent the following reply to the question, what's a non-emotive word for bugs, errors, computer bugs, glitches, defects that happen as a matter of course? Answer, exception or anomaly. You can also say conditional exception or anomaly, which only manifests itself under unforeseen circumstances. Do you remember this?
I hadn't remembered this, but I had seen this. I think it was brought up yesterday or in the course of this phase. So I did remember it at that point.
Was this acted on by you? That rather than referring to things as bugs, glitches, defects, you should use the words anomaly or exceptions?
So I don't believe I ever used the word exceptions. Anomalies, so Simon Baker pulled together the information to provide to Second Sight, and he headed it up, anomalies, and that's why I just adopted the word anomaly. But in my statement, I've referred to bugs.
Yes, you have in other places where we've asked you a question about bugs, errors and defects.
Yeah. So I think and I'm sure there is a technical categorization for each of bugs, errors and defects. I don't know what that is.
But reading this now, can you see this is an attempt through the use of language to control a narrative? Mr. Blake might call it Orwellian.
Yes.
Is that what it was like working in the post office at this time? That language was controlled? to lead the narrative?
We certainly had, in all my time at Post Office and Royal Mail prior to that, then we always had agreed messaging. So, you know, in terms of consistency of messages and words that we would use. I didn't think too much of this at the time. It was, you know, the important thing for me at the time was there were 2 bugs, errors or defects, however we wanted to term them, that I wasn't aware of up until that point. They were explained to me as, you know, this, you know, every system has these things. It's how you deal with it, it's important, and we just moved on from there. But it didn't strike me as something really unusual at that point.
What didn't strike you as unusual?
In terms that we were...
A preferred use of language?
Yeah, so the agreed language that we wanted to use there, and if it's come from Paula's note, was anomaly. And that's what Simon had put. So when he shared that information, they were headed up anomaly.
Looking at it now, can you see what perhaps sits behind this?
Yes.
What do you think sits behind it?
As you said, it's about controlling the narrative. It's about using a consistent... I don't think it actually worked here, because...
That's a different issue.
Yeah, because we, you know, as I've defaulted straight to bug, but it was... I agree, it was an attempt to control the narrative in terms of what we were saying.
And what do you think the intended effect was to use language of exception or anomaly rather than bug or glitch or defect?
Well, I think from Paula's note, she says a non-emotional, is that what I think she said there, but a non-emotive word. I didn't think too much of it at the time. I mean,
do you think it's about emotion?
Well, I don't think it's about emotion.
It's trying to suggest something materially different, isn't it? An exception or anomaly carries with it the implication that it's odd, that it's strange, that it's peculiar.
Yes.
Whereas a bug, what does that suggest? Or a defect in your system, what does that carry with it?
I think for me it carries that it could be exceptional, in as that because we hadn't seen many of them. But I think the word of a bug is a bit more routine. So there's that's what we expect from that situation. As I say, I didn't give it too much thought at the time. It was anomaly is the word that Simon put onto the information he shared, and that's why I've picked it up in my witness statement, because when I was referring to the documents. But as I say, I've instinctively defaulted to bug.
Can I turn to a different aspect of information handling, that of legal professional privilege? To your knowledge, did the Post Office from 2011 onwards, at least 2011 onwards, seek to use claims of legal professional privilege as a tool to cloak communications in privacy?
I didn't think so at the time.
Does that mean, looking back, you can see how it sought to do so now?
So from the information I've seen as part of this process, then I think there was a tendency to do that.
Did it seek to regulate its conduct and carry out its communications in a way that maximised the possibility of cloaking its communications in privacy so that they wouldn't have to be disclosed?
Again, I wasn't aware of that.
Can we look, please, at poll 0017 6467? Can we look, please, to start with at page 2? This is an email of the 20th of October 2011 to you, amongst others, from Emily Springford. And if we look at page 3, please, and scroll down. Thank you. We can see that she was a principal lawyer in dispute resolution, I think in Royal Mail Group.
Yes.
Do you remember Emily Springford?
No, I'd never met her.
Go back to page 2, please. It's about disclosure and evidence gathering in the context of the JFSA claims, and it addresses 3 topics: document preservation, document creation, and the information that's needed to respond to the letters of claim. And I think you've seen this.
Yes, I have.
Thank you. We've seen it before and recently, so I'm not going to read it out. Can we go to something new, which is your communication on page 1, please? Can we see that you send this on to a collection of people? Mr. Breeden, Miss Norbury, Miss Richardson, Mr. Wales, Mr. Lawrence, Miss
Yes.
Buchanan, etc. Yes?
That was my lead team, my direct reports.
So you were sending it on to your team, yes?
Yes, I was.
And what did, in broad terms, the people who were your direct reports do?
So there was a mix. John and Lynn were contract. They managed the contract advisors team. The rest then were so just to give a bit of context. So this when I took over, I took on additional responsibilities. I think it was towards the end of December 2010. This was the new team that came together. So it was bringing different areas of responsibility at the time. So Lynn and John were contract management team. The rest had been my existing team, which were managing the network of provision of post offices, opening, closures, and also I think at this point I brought in the training and audit function into this as well.
Okay, and they would have had people working under them and people
Yes.
working under them. And would you expect them to distribute that to the people working to them?
Yes.
So it would be cascaded down through the business in that way?
Yes, it would, yes.
And if we see you forward Miss Springford's email, and in the second line you say, with the litigation being a strong possibility, our legal team has issued some guidance, some advice, guidance and directives in the email below. Once you've read the email, I need you to action the relevant sections. But I want everyone in our team to be aware of the need to, 1, preserve all documents which might be potentially relevant to these claims, and you set them out.
Yep.
And then 2, mark communications in relation to these cases, and as detailed below, legally privileged and confidential. Did you think that message really reflected Miss Springford's advice?
Yes, I did.
I.e. mark all communications in relation to those cases legally privileged and confidential?
Yes.
But that wasn't Miss Springford's advice, was it?
So I thought I was just simply passing on Miss Springford's advice because, as I said, this was a fairly new team coming together. Lynn and John particularly would have been aware of this, these type of requirements, where the rest of the team wouldn't have been. So that was me just simply passing on the instruction and the requirements from Emily Springford.
What she had said, we can see it on page 3, in the second paragraph from the top. Third line, as litigation is now a distinct possibility, a document will be privileged if its dominant purpose is to give or receive legal advice about the litigation or to gather evidence for use in the litigation. This also applies to communications with third parties. And then first bullet point, if the dominant purpose of the communication is not to obtain legal advice, try to structure the document in such a way that its dominant purpose can be said to be evidence gathering for use in litigation. Now, without for the moment addressing the question of whether or not what Miss Springford advised was correct or appropriate, she was saying that only where the dominant purpose of the document was evidence gathering, might it, in connection with the litigation, might a document be said to enjoy privilege. That qualified her advice, didn't it?
Yes.
What you advise, page 1, scroll down. Mark communications in relation to these cases, i.e. the list of cases, legally privileged and confidential. You've dropped the bit about only if the dominant purpose of the communication can be said to obtain or receive legal advice.
That was me just summarising, because I'd asked them to familiarise themselves with Emily's note, asked them to read it, and it was just me just bringing their attention to, this is important. I need you to be aware of what Emily's asking us to do, and asking them to comply with that. So there was nothing else other than me just summarising.
Let's look at it this way. At the very least, you understood all communications in relation to those cases as now being legally privileged and confidential.
Well, that's not what I've said. I've said marked communication. I didn't say all. But this was a new situation for me. I'd not been involved in disclosure before, and a number of my team wouldn't have been involved in disclosure before. So this was me just passing on the requirements and the requests from Emily.
You're not passing it on, are you? You're passing it on, and then you say you want everyone in the team to be made aware of the need to do these three things.
Yes.
And the second of those things is materially different from what she advised, isn't it?
So that wasn't my intention. This was just, my intention was just to bring it to the fore of people's minds in this newly formed team, so that they were aware of what we needed to do. And the third bullet point was making sure that they treated all of this as a priority, because that, I think at the time, as it was played out to me, is the legal team sometimes struggled to get the information they needed out of the business in
You're
a
talking about
timely
a different
fashion.
thing now, which is about the priority of communications.
Yes.
I'm talking about the second bullet point. So if we just focus on the second bullet point, you at least understood that all communications were to be treated as legally privileged and confidential, didn't you?
That's not what I was saying in here. As I said, I just tried to summarise what Emily had asked.
Why did you tell them to mark communications in relation to those cases as legally privileged and confidential, when that's not the advice that had been received?
I can't remember back that far, but as I say, my intention was only really to pass on what Emily had asked, and in terms of summary, I'd asked them to read what she'd said. I can't remember any further discussions after this. And yeah, I can't remember anything further after that in terms of what we did. But if there were any queries about what they were doing, then they would have raised it at the time, and I can't remember any.
Thank you. That can come down. Can I turn, please, then, to issues of substance? And firstly, the question of remote access.
Okay.
Can we turn to your witness statement on page 10, please, at paragraph 19? I just want to examine what you say in your witness statement about remote access, and then go and look at some of the underlying documents. You say a document is an email from John Breeden to me on the 5th of December 2010. I cannot recall this email or the content of the pack he attaches. Having reviewed the email, I've noted that Lynn Hobbs advised Mike Granville and Rod Ismay that she had, quote, found out that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. Yes? So you're saying that in an email that was sent to you on the 5th of December 2010, that you were told that had been discovered that Fujitsu can put an entry into a branch account remotely, yes?
So Lynn had said that to John, and then John had forwarded Lynn's email to me.
So it's the equivalent of you being given that information.
Second hand, yeah.
Does that make a difference?
Inasmuch he was bringing it to my attention for information, so I think it's a slightly different thing.
Different thing to what?
To actually getting it directly with, to action. As I think I said in here, this was something I wasn't aware of and hadn't been aware of previously, and I don't actually remember receiving these emails. And I did ask for, Post Office for, can I have my response to this? Because I would.
And there isn't one?
There isn't one. Because
Okay,
I couldn't
well,
remember.
put it this way, you got an email on the 5th of December which said, in terms, that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. Agreed?
That's what Lynn had dropped into her email, yeah.
Let's try again. You had been given information on the 5th of December 2010 that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. Agreed?
In that email chain, yes.
Thank you. Can we go forwards, please, to page 15 of your witness statement? At paragraph 31. And you say, pre-2011, I had no knowledge of the ability of Fujitsu employees to alter transaction data or data in branch accounts without the knowledge or consent of sub-postmasters.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
But that's not right, is it? Because you had been told about it in the email of the 5th of December.
But as I said, I don't ever remember seeing that in December.
That's a different thing, whether now you remember, 14 years later, receiving an email. You're saying in the witness statement here, I had no knowledge of the ability. Whereas, in fact, you did have knowledge because you'd been sent that email, hadn't you?
But without seeing that email as part of this, I would have no knowledge. That's all I'm trying to say is that the first conscious knowledge of that was the email from Tracy Marshall, which would have been several weeks after. So the John Breeden email was, I think, the 5th of December. And a month later, this information came from Tracy Marshall.
So you, the light bulb moment for you was not the Breeden email of December 2010, it was the Marshall email of January 2011.
Yes.
Okay. Can we look at the Breeden email of 2010 then, please? Poll 308 8956. Page, the first page is from Mr. Breeden to you and copied to a number of other people. Yes?
Yes.
And he forwards a chain, if we look at the bottom of the page, Miss Hobbs, do you remember who Miss Hobbs was?
Lynn Hobbs, I do, yes.
And tell us.
Oh, sorry. She was I think it was the general manager of the support network. John Breeden, at this time, and I can't remember the switch of responsibilities to me, but John Breeden would be reporting to Lynn and had done for quite some time, as did Lynn Norbury.
And so did Lynn Hobbs indirectly report to you?
No, Lynn was more senior than me.
I see. She says, this is the last email exchange I had with Mike Granville about the BIS meeting. The attached documents were what Mike was proposing to send to BIS. I haven't seen anything further, but I did have a conversation with Mike about the whole remote access to Horizon issue. The view being expressed that whilst this may be possible, it's not something we've asked Fujitsu to provide. I don't know what the final outcome was. I'm also forwarding 2 further emails, one from Rod Ismay, which is the final report he produced as a result of a request from David Smith. And then over the page, please. The second from Mike Griffiths with a document that was sent to Biz in August as a briefing in advance of Ed Davies' meeting with JFSA.
So that's Mike Granville.
Sorry?
Mike Granville.
Yes.
Sorry, you said Griffiths.
And then cut into Lynn Hobbs's email is her reply to Mike and Rod saying, I found out this week that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. Came up when we were exploring solutions around a problem generated by the system following migration to Horizon Online. This issue was quickly identified and a fix put in place, but it impacted around 60 branches and meant a loss or gain incurred in a particular week, in effect disappeared from the system. One solution quickly discounted because of the implications around integrity was for Fujitsu to remotely enter a value into a branch account to reintroduce the missing loss or gain. So Post Office can't do this, but Fujitsu can. I think you'd agree that's very significant information, isn't it?
Yes. But prior to this, I would have had no awareness of any of this stuff.
Which makes it even more significant. No?
In as much as this was something I wasn't aware of, I said, I don't recall seeing this. And then looking at Lynn's note, which is quite a strange note, the way she's dropped this into an email chain, which I find quite strange.
Strange for us too, because we can find no record of it anywhere else.
I've never seen an email like this before, where something's just cut in. You'd normally forward the email or attach it. So I find this really strange. But I think at this point, so Lynn left the organisation shortly after. I think this was, in looking at this, I think this was Lynn just passing over to John things before she left, and John was coming into my team.
So just taking a step back from this, this is an email chain forwarding to you the Rod Ismay report, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And at the same time it's forwarding you the Rod Ismay report, it's telling you something about remote access. Mm-hmm. Yes? And the beginning and end part of this bit that's cut in is about the remote access, and the bit in the middle is about the context in which remote access has arisen, correct?
Yes.
So it's saying that there is a facility to put entries into branch accounts remotely. It provides the context in which that issue had arisen, 60 branches, and a fix, and how do we correct the error that has occurred? Should we use this? No, let's not use this remote access, because that has issues of integrity about it. But in any event, Fujitsu can do this.
Yes.
That's what it's telling you.
Yes, it is.
Can we go back to paragraph 16 of your witness statement, please? It's on page 9, please. Scroll down, please. You're dealing with the Ismay report here. You say, whilst I cannot recall receiving the report, I assume I would have been reassured by its content at the time. You then say some stuff about knowing what you know now.
Yes.
And you say in the last 3 lines, notably, the report says there is an absence of backdoors. Yes?
Yes.
And then you set out some information you now know. So you're saying that you would have been reassured by the contents of the Ismay report, yes?
Yes, but I don't remember seeing that in December. I definitely saw the Ismay report. I'm not sure when. I thought it was at a later date than that. But
well, we know that you got it on the 5th of December 2010 because we've just looked at the email chain.
Yes, what I'm saying is I don't remember it from that point, but I do remember reading the report, and I thought I had it separately, but not at the time that Rod put that together, which I think was August.
You say that you would have been reassured, and seemingly you would have been reassured because the report said there was an absence of back doors, yes?
Yes.
But the very email chain that brought this report to your attention said something very different, didn't it?
I'm not sure, for me, that registered as different. I think...
Well, no, let's look at what your reaction was as a separate question to what the facts are. You would agree that the very email chain that brought the Rod Ismay report to your attention said something very different about the absence of back doors, didn't it?
Well, it didn't mention back doors. It said that they could inject.
They could Fujitsu could remotely access and inject transactions.
So I think the back door bit is quite different, I think. So, so for me, the absence of back doors feels that that's done in an uncontrolled way. Whereas if they could inject, which I later learnt about balancing transaction, which is that kind of scenario. So I think for me that the two just they're not the same thing to me.
What's the difference?
So as I say, I think the back door is, I think, more of an uncontrolled way, whereas the injecting is done in a controlled way.
And so do you think you made that distinction at the time?
Probably not.
This is you rationalising it now?
And because I know more now than I knew then. So I think at the time, then, as I say, I don't remember getting that email from John, so that didn't register with me at the time. And the fact that Lynn, who was more senior, so just to put it into context, Lynn, so my direct report was into Sue Huggins at the time. Sue and Lynn were peers, so Lynn was senior to me. The fact that she'd mentioned in there that she'd raised it with Andy McLean, who again was at that level but in IT. And I think Mark Burley was a project manager in that space as well. The fact that she'd raised it and they were looking at it, but she didn't have an update. I mean, when I look back there wasn't a sense of urgency about that I would have expected had she been really concerned about what she'd learnt.
That can come down, thank you. The importance of Mr. Ismay saying that there were no back doors into Horizon was that it meant that all data entry or acceptance was at branch level, correct?
Yes.
And was tagged against the log-on ID of the user, correct?
Yes.
And the significance of that was that the ownership of all accounting was truly at branch level, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The email that we looked at was saying that ownership of accounting was not at branch level, wasn't it? It was saying that Fujitsu can remotely inject transactions, can alter it.
Yes.
Did that not undermine, in your mind, what Mr. Ismay had said?
I think the difference, and I think this is an important bit for me, was if something were to be injected into a branch accounts, was it with the knowledge of the postmaster whose accounts they were? And I think that's a really important aspect of it.
And the email didn't say anything about knowledge of postmaster, did it?
It didn't say either way, whether they were aware or not, no.
It was saying that if we did do it, there would be issues about integrity.
Yes.
Didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that was hinting or suggesting that this was all being done above board with the knowledge of sub-postmasters?
I didn't really think about it at the time.
Can we go back to the email, please? Poll 308-8956. So this is the chain that forwards you the Ismay report in December 2010. How well did you know Rod Ismay?
Not very well at that point. So he was, we were part of the senior leadership team, and we periodically got together for conferences and things like that. But
Would you meet him on a monthly basis?
no,
How frequently was your contact?
I wouldn't have met him in terms of the course of my role prior to this. So this was the first time. So stepping into this role was the first time that I really started to work with Chesterfield, which is where Rod was in charge of Chesterfield. Prior to that, I wouldn't have had much involvement with Rod at all.
So he was head of product and branch accounting at this time.
That later became Finance Service Centre, but yeah.
And if we go to page 2, please, we can see that Lynn Hobbs' email went to Rod Ismay originally, yes?
Yes.
Because it's addressed to Mike and Rod, and she has written into her own email, my reply to Mike and Rod. You say that you think this is a very strange way of writing emails.
Yes.
Cutting and pasting something into your own email rather than either attaching that email or forwarding it.
Yes.
As I've said, we haven't had disclosed to us, there's no trace whatsoever of the email in Mr. Ismay's inbox. Are you saying that at the time you would have regarded it as suspicious that this had happened?
Yes, as I said, I don't recall seeing this, and that would have struck me as being really strange. I just find it a very strange way to do something, because whatever and how I saw things during my time at the post office is you either had the email forwarded or it was as an attachment. So you had the complete chain of communication regarding whatever the topic of that was. So just coming back to that, so I think had I seen this, this would have struck me as being really odd, which is why I think I didn't see it.
Are you saying you did not see an email that was sent to you?
Yeah, I don't recall.
That's a different issue. If you just go back to page 1. Whether 14 or so years on you can now remember receiving an email is one issue.
Mm-hmm.
You were tending to suggest a moment ago that you did not see this email.
Yes.
How are you able now to say positively you did not see this email?
So what I'm saying is I don't remember seeing it, and the fact that the way it's constructed is really strange, and I think that I would have remembered that at the time, because it strikes me as being really, really strange.
Did you read your emails?
Yeah, normally.
Would there be any reason not to read an email?
Volume of work.
What about one that's about briefing the sponsor department, the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills?
So as I said, this was a new work area for me. I hadn't been involved in this type of work before. I think the 5th of December, I think was a Sunday, because I've looked to see why, I've not picked this up. But I tended to read all my emails, but I also tended to respond to all my emails as well. And this is what strikes me as really odd, because I didn't have a response to this one.
In any event, the Ismay report was brought to your attention in the context of a discussion about what had been said to the Department of Business Innovation and Skills earlier in 2010. Would you agree, looking at it now, that Mr. Breeden's emails did not make it clear whether the department had been told about Fujitsu's ability to tamper with branch accounts?
Yes.
Would that not have been a very important issue for you to have got to the bottom of?
I say at the time, this was a new area for me. and I wouldn't have given it that much attention. So the people who would have been involved in that would be Mike Granville, that was his role, and Sue Huggins, who was my boss, and I think Mike Granville reported into Sue at one point as well. That was her area, so it wouldn't have registered with me at that time.
But there was a possibility that the single shareholder had been told that the post office had got a significant issue on its hands, namely its supplier could tamper with branch accounts.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be something that you would want to get to the bottom of?
As
What has government been told?
As I said at the time, this didn't register. Well, I don't believe I saw it, but actually it didn't register because prior to this, I mean, this is the first time of me getting involved in anything to do with Horizon Integrity. Prior to that, from the time that...
Sorry, Ms van der Bogerd, the point I'm making is that it's in the context of the single shareholder, the government,
yes,
being briefed. And therefore, it's very important to find out what has been said to government and what the true position is. Mm-hmm. And what you tell us, you've told us today, and what you said in your witness statement, is that there might be good reasons why there's no follow-up to this.
Yes.
On paper, because Lynn Hobbs left the organisation shortly afterwards.
Yes, or that it had been dealt with. I saw nothing coming out after this to tell me, well, actually what had happened to it, or that wasn't a problem.
Was this dealt with offline, i.e. so as not to leave a paper trail?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was it dealt with by verbal discussions only?
So I'm not that I was aware of. Whether those conversations happened, because I would have expected the follow-up to that to have happened with Lynn, Andy McLean, who says she'd referred it to, and Mike Granville, and also Mark Burley. So I'm not aware of anything as a result of this email pack.
Thank you, that can come down. The email, as we've seen, referred to the context in which the discovery of remote access had been made. Mm-hmm. Remember the incident that had been discussed in a meeting involving 60-odd branches back in October 2010?
Yes.
Yes? Can we look, please, at that? Poll 302 8838. This is the, I think, the only record that we have of either what happened or what was to happen at that meeting in October 2010. And if we look at the attendee list, I think we can see that there are 6 members of the post office present, and they're the first 6 on the list.
Yes.
Did you have responsibility for any of those?
No.
Can we turn to page 3, please?
Sorry, not at the time, I didn't.
Yes. Nor in December 2010 or January 2011. Can we go to page 3, please, and scroll down? Can you see the proposals for how the bug was to be addressed in relation to the affected branches? And can you see under solution 1, the proposed solution 1 was to alter the branch figure at the counter to show the discrepancy. Fujitsu would have to manually write an entry value to the local branch account. The impact would be when the branch comes to complete the next trading period, they'd have a discrepancy they'd have to bring into account. The risk was this has significant data integrity concerns and could lead to questions of tampering with the branch system and could generate questions around how the discrepancy was caused. This solution could have moral implications of the post office changing branch data without informing the branch. Would you agree that this record, even though that solution was not in the event adopted, makes it clear, firstly, that Fujitsu could tamper with branch accounts remotely?
Yes.
And secondly, they could do so without the branch being able to see it or to know about it.
Yes.
Did you speak to any of the 6 people on the attendee list after receiving the Lynn Hobbs email?
No.
Did any of those people draw subsequently those 2 material facts? Fujitsu can tamper with branch accounts remotely, and they can do so without the branch being able to see it or to know about it, to your attention?
No.
Would you agree that those 2 facts, if they were to have emerged, would have significantly undermined the reputation and integrity of Horizon?
Yes.
At this time, October 2010 into January 2011, the Post Office was wedded to maintaining the reputation of Horizon, wasn't it?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I wasn't aware of this document until much later in the GLO.
How has it happened that this additional record, in addition to the December 2010 email chain, hasn't found its way to you? What's gone wrong?
Well, I think back in 2010, then I wasn't involved in anything to do with Fujitsu or Horizon issues. It was I only started to get involved in 20. So there was the Tracy Marshall email, which was in advance of the Ferndown meeting that I attended, and again that was me just coming into that because my boss, Sue Huggins at the time, was out on holiday, and then we came into the Shoesmith's letters about the individual branches. So this wasn't my domain at all.
But you were beginning to look into Horizon integrity at the end of 2010, beginning of 2011, weren't you?
No, I wasn't really. So it was really only when Second Sight came into the business when I started to work with them around the spot reviews. So that's where I would say I stepped into looking at this type of issues. Prior to that, I wasn't.
Or was it that you and others within the Post Office studiously avoided lifting the lid on what had happened at the meeting of October 2010, when the receipts and payments mismatch bug was not only discovered, but also was revealed Fujitsu's ability to tamper with branch accounts?
I wasn't aware of this, and I wish I had been aware of this at the time, because that fundamentally changes what my understanding was to do with Horizon System. And even just the language used in here, clearly it was known. And the fact, and you can't get away from this on this document, that they were consciously deciding what to do and what not to do and not to share. And that's hugely alarming.
Thank you. So that might be an appropriate moment for our new system of 2 10-minute breaks to take the first of them. Can we say until 11:10, please?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Beer. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thanks.
Ms. Van den Bogerd, can we turn to the second series of correspondence relevant to the issue? We've seen that you referred in your paragraph 19 to an email that you received from Tracy Marshall dated the 5th of January 2011. Can we turn that up, please? Poll 0029 4728. Can you see at the top, it's an email dated the 5th of January to you and others from Tracy Marshall.
Yes.
And her title was Agents Development Manager. Can you explain what that was, please?
I don't actually remember what she was doing at the time.
What relation did she have to you and your work?
Not an awful lot at that point.
Why was she writing to you?
So it was to Kevin, really. So I think Kevin had asked her to... I think she was part of Kevin's team. I think Kevin had asked her to do something. I don't remember having any conversation with Tracy about this until I got the email.
Do you know what the context was for Kevin asking?
It was the Ferndown meeting. So I'd been asked to, as I said earlier, to attend this. It wasn't something I would normally do. But Sue Huggins, who was my line manager at the time, who reported to Kevin, was on holiday. So she'd asked me to step in.
And so the subject is Horizon system issues. And item 2 reads 2. Post Office or Fujitsu having remote access to individual Horizon systems. The first paragraph, Post Office cannot remotely access systems and make changes to specific stock units, etc. Fujitsu can remotely access systems, and they do this on numerous occasions on a network-wide basis in order to remedy glitches in the system created as a result of new software upgrades. Technically, Fujitsu could access an individual branch remotely and move money around. However, this has never happened yet. The authority process required and the audit process are robust enough to prevent this activity from being undertaken fraudulently. The authority process itself would take several days and would require a number of representatives from the business to provide concurrence to the activity, including head of network services. If a change were made remotely to an individual branch account, it would be flagged on the business's data ledgers and would appear as a mismatch in product and branch accounts in Chesterfield. PB&A would then investigate to determine whether the mismatch was authorised internally or not. So although changes can be made remotely, they'd be spotted and the person making the change would be identified. Now, the inquiry has heard evidence that suggests that the claim that Fujitsu had never used its capability to access individual branches and move money around is incorrect. By the time you received this email, did you know that?
No.
The inquiry's received evidence that the authority process stroke audit process to prevent the activity from occurring was not robust, and that there wasn't sufficient assurance that it was not being used fraudulently. At that time, did you know that, receive evidence to that effect?
No.
The inquiry's heard evidence that Fujitsu would sometimes use a sub-postmaster's user ID to inject transactions into branch accounts so that the standard ARQ data produced subsequently could not distinguish between injected transactions and those made in the branch. Did you know that at the point of receiving this email?
No.
The inquiry has received evidence that there was unauthorised and unauditable privileged user access by Fujitsu. Had you heard about that by the time of receiving this email?
No.
Or how long it had been in operation for?
No.
And what a concern it had been within Fujitsu that this privileged user access existed and was unregulated?
I had no knowledge of any of that.
I'm told that you need to speak up.
Sorry.
Significantly, please.
Significantly, okay.
Thank you. The month after you received this email, sorry, within the month, I think it's the next day, you interviewed Mrs. Rachpal Athwal in Old Street, London, yes?
That's correct.
This was the Ferndown branch with which she was concerned in Dorset, is that right?
That's correct.
And she was the sub-postmistress of that branch, wasn't she?
She was.
And can you summarise what had happened to Mrs. Athwal?
So I wasn't involved in what happened. From memory, there had been an issue on audit, and she had been suspended. The first I became aware of it, and I put this in my statement, was when Lynn Hobbs had contacted me, because my role at the time was providing, as I said, network services, branches, opening, reclosings, but also providing mobile post office services as well. And she'd asked me would I be able to provide a mobile post office outside this branch or close to the branch if she needed me to. And that was the first I became aware of anything to do with, and I can't remember when. It would have been a few months or leading into this, because I don't remember when the audit and the suspension actually took place. But that was the context. That's what I was aware. I knew it was high profile because Lynn had told me, and I believe Dave Smith was the MD at this point, and he had got involved. Paula would have been the network director at this point, I think.
That can come down, thank you. And the issue at Ferndown had involved an unexplained loss shown on a dormant stock
Right.
unit. Do you remember?
Yes.
A relatively small amount of money, I think.
I think so. I think it was hundreds as opposed
to... Yeah, £700, I think.
Yeah.
And so you attend this interview at Old Street. Can we look at the transcript of the interview, please? Poll 0029 4743. What was the purpose of the interview?
So from my understanding, it was to re-establish the relationship, because I think as a result of the suspension and some of the issues around that there was a breakdown in the relationship. So that's what I thought the purpose of the meeting was.
To re-establish the relationship between the post office on the one hand and the
sub-post mistress. Well, Mrs. Atwell was the sub-post mistress, but it was actually Val, her husband, who was the most vocal in the meeting. And I understood at this time that Val had been talking to the press and things like that. So, but it was essentially to, so Mrs. Atwell had been reinstated, and at this point, and it was really about just re-establishing that relationship, which is what Kevin was looking to do.
If the purpose was to re-establish the relationship, why was the meeting tape recorded?
I don't know, actually, because it wasn't typical that we would have recorded these type of meetings. I don't know, but it was, and that would have been, I think, probably at Kevin's. I'm not sure. I didn't really question it.
If we look, we can just see the explanation given by Mr. Gillibrand. Thank you. Just for the record, again, the purpose of recording the interview is to make sure we've got a factual record of the meeting. We've agreed the content of this meeting will remain confidential. The information discussed is not to be shared with other parties unless the express permission of all attendees around this room is given. And Mr. Athwell says, I've got a problem with that.
Yeah.
Again, can you help us? If you're trying to re-establish the relationship between a husband and wife postmaster mistress team, why do you tape them?
As I said, that wasn't my decision, and it's something that we didn't normally do. The only time we would have recorded interviews is where it was one person, from a post office perspective, having a meeting with somebody else. Is what we would normally do. Otherwise, we would take notes. So I don't know. I mean, I don't recall having any kind of pre-meet with Kevin on this. As I say, I'd stepped into this because my boss wasn't available. So I'd say I can't add anything further to that, I'm afraid.
We can just scroll up and see who's present. Mr. Gillibrand and you. Helen Rose. Why was Helen Rose there?
So Helen Rose was part of the security team, and I think she was an analyst, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I asked her or whether Lynn had asked her to look at the information, so that we could establish what had happened in the branch, and that was Helen's role.
And then Mr. and Mrs. Athwell and Mark Baker from the Federation. Can we go forward to page 3, please? The top of the page, and this is Mr. Baker speaking. So have moved forward from where we left with Andy Bayfield when he did the appeal, and he accepted during the interview that the initiation of the stock unit that had been closed down for some months prior to that, into use Ratchpell's words, came back into life with money in it. He said that could only be caused by one of two ways, and that was either by a human physically doing it within that branch, or it has been generated by the computer itself for one reason or another. And he was going away to get to the bottom of that. And as far as I'm concerned, on the technical issue, that's where I'm still waiting to find out how this has happened. And that was accurate, wasn't it? That Mrs. Athwell had been reinstated, but there remained a mystery how on a closed down, a dormant stock unit, money had suddenly appeared in it.
Yes.
And there needed to be some technical explanation or investigation of that, didn't there?
Yes.
And you say, AB, that's you, Helen has looked at the information from the logs and has taken that information and put it into a working file for herself, so she can, because as you can appreciate, that's an awful lot of data that would be for that branch, and put it on there and can track where that amount of money has moved through the system in your branch. So she can talk you through that, and we can do that right now. And then Mr. Baker, if we see what he says, about 4 lines in, he asks a question. Was it something someone did in the branch, or was it something the system has done? Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
And then if we can go forwards, please, to page 11. I'm just reading these to give you a bit of context for what the issues are. Towards the foot of the page, about 8 lines in, starting with the item 152, Mr. Gillibrand says, well, we can pinpoint where the figures have come from. That's not true. We can pinpoint where every figure comes from. Mr. Athwell, can you manipulate those figures behind the scenes? Mr. Gillibrand, no, we can't. Mr. Athwell, no, you can't get into the system, are you saying? Mr. Gillibrand says, no, we can't. Mr. Athwell, no, you can't get into the systems. Answer, no. Mr. Athwell, you cannot get into the Horizon system. Mr. Gillibrand, no. Over the page. He says, yes, you can. And Mr. Gillibrand says, no, we can't. No, we can't. And then you say, nobody in the post office can get into the system. Anything you've seen on the screen has been logged against a user logging in on the system against a password that only that individual should have in the office. We don't want to know what passwords are, so we cannot access those systems at all. In the light of the email that you'd received the month before, on the 5th of December, what you said there wasn't true, was it?
So on the 5th of December, Lynn said, post office can't, Fujitsu can.
Yeah.
And that's what I've said there, that nobody in post office can get into the system.
Oh, come on, Miss Van den Bogerd. Are you saying that what you said overall there is accurate?
So that is accurate. We'll go on to talk later about Fujitsu, I believe. But in terms of what I said there, that was accurate. Post office nobody in post office can get into the system then, and I still don't think anybody can now, even today, even 4 years after I've left the business.
It was inaccurate by not being a full account, wasn't it?
So
Nobody in post office can do this, but we found out that people in Fujitsu can. That would be the open and transparent thing to say, wouldn't it?
So at the point here, as you can tell from the notes here, it was quite confrontational between Val and Kevin. And I came in at this to try and calm, so we could actually start having a proper conversation there. But what I've said there is correct. Nobody in post office can get into the system. And then Val went on to say about business development and the Chesterfield team, and still nobody in post office can get into the system.
Did you think that was the honest thing to do, to only talk about post office, when you knew very well about Fujitsu's facility remotely to access branch accounts?
So I think it was important in terms of the distinction. Nobody in post office can, and that's what I was saying. The conversation goes on, but all I was doing at that point was distilling the confrontation exchange between Kevin and Val.
It carries on. Mr. Athwell, okay, you probably can't, but your business development or whoever they are in Chesterfield can. Nobody in post office can do that, you say. Mr. Athwell, are you sure about that? Do you want to go back and ask somebody? I've already asked. You have. Well, I've got some contacts as well within Fujitsu, and I've asked them, okay, and these will come out in the open later on. And what did they tell you? Sorry, and what did they tell you? Did they tell you that people in post office can access? Yes. Post office cannot categorically access information in branch because it's all done against a user ID. Fine, I'm okay. Sorry, I'm not going to argue with you over it. I'm not going to argue over it. And then Mr. Gillibrand, but it's a fact nobody in post office can access Horizon. They can't manipulate any of the data. Fine. Why were you not being open about Fujitsu access?
So all the information I had was what Tracy had put into the email of the day before.
No, you had the email from Mr. Breeden of the 5th of December.
But what I've said is I didn't remember seeing that email from John Breeden at the time. So this is really my first recollection of anything to do with questioning the system.
This is within a month of receiving that email, almost to the day. It's about the very same subject matter. Are you saying you airbrushed it from your mind?
Well, I don't remember even seeing it. So, and that's what I struggle with, because...
Well, maybe we struggle with it too. Is what truly happening here is that you're telling us that you don't recall it because you know that the email of the 5th of December 2010 presents you with a problem?
No, not at all. I mean, I wish I had remembered that information, because that, coming into this meeting with the further information, would have been, I would have known a lot more. But in this meeting, I came in on the back of the email that came in the day before from Tracy into this meeting. So that was my first recollection of that information. So the December note from John had no bearing on me in this meeting.
Why? It's about remote access. This is about remote access.
But because I said I don't remember seeing that email, so that if I hadn't seen it, then I wouldn't have taken that knowledge into this meeting. This, for me, was the first time that I'd actually seen, in my head, seen anything to do with remote access. And as I said previously, in my other roles, this hadn't come up as an issue.
Can we go forwards to page 47, please?
Can I take it, Mr. Beer, that in the parts of the transcript which immediately follow the exchange you've been looking at, the issue of whether or not Fujitsu could gain remote access doesn't arise?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, fine.
Can we go forward, please, to page 47? and scroll down to entry 857. You say you claim there's a glitch in the system in reference to the £436.81. I think that's part of the £700 that showed up on the stock unit. And Mr. Athol says, and the £400 on the audit that they carried out. You say, we've demonstrated for the information that we have. He interrupts and says, no, you haven't. You've satisfied yourself. You haven't satisfied me. And you say, well, I have satisfied myself because I've seen the information, and that is down to a user at Ferndown under a password only known to that person who has accessed that system. Nobody else could have done that. So therefore, I'm satisfied that was not a glitch in the system. He says, but the £400 transferred out of the safe into a stock unit with a recipient on that stock unit wasn't even logged on, didn't even work that day. How do you explain that? You say, well, I haven't looked at the evidence, I can't, but I'm sure, given that I'm confident in the system. You started this interview by asserting to the sub-postmaster and her husband that the security of user ID was important, didn't you?
Yes.
You knew on the basis of both the email of the 5th of December 2010 and the email of the 5th of January 2011 that Fujitsu could remotely access the system.
So as I said, I don't remember the 5th of December one, but on the email that Tracy sent to me, that was all the information that I've been provided with on that at that point.
Can we go back to page 41, please? Mr. Baker says, as you can appreciate, it's a very simple computer at the end of the day, sitting at the end of an ISDN line. If someone knows what they're doing, they could hack it if they've got the access rights. But of course, records would be kept to that somewhere, because you can't even look at a computer without it keeping a log of what's gone on. You say, as an audit trail. He says, but you know it is technically, ultimately, someone within Fujitsu could get into a unit and do whatever they need to do. And you say, not without being seen to have done that mark. Mr. Gillibrand says, this is military-level security we've got with Horizon. It's highly encrypted. It's very safe. It meets all the external tests. Why didn't you reveal what you had learnt in the email of the 5th of December?
Because, as I said, I didn't remember seeing that email, and therefore that had no bearing on my discussion at this meeting. So the information I took into this meeting was from the Tracy Marshall email that came in the day before.
So this is a month after you received the Hobbs-Breeden email. Why wasn't that ringing any bells for you?
Because, as I said previously, I don't recall receiving that email, and the contents of that email hadn't registered if I had seen it, and I don't believe they did, because, as I've said earlier, it would have stuck in my mind because of the way that email was constructed, because it's very strange. So I do not believe I had seen the contents of those emails coming into this meeting.
How was Tracy Marshall qualified to tell you about the integrity of the Horizon system?
So Tracy Marshall herself was passing that on from, I forget who she said, I think it was Andy McLean. Again, I think it was referenced. He would have been a very senior person in IT.
She says that she had had conversations with Andy McLean and Dave Holbert.
Okay, so Dave Holbert, again, is a very senior person in the IT function. So whilst Tracy, and I can't speak for Tracy's knowledge of Horizon or for IT capability, she wasn't an IT person, but Tracy would have had the experience and known that if Kevin had asked her to get some information, that it would have been really important that she got the information and passed it on as she had received it, which is what I believe she did in the email.
You were being challenged here by a trusted sub-postmaster and her husband, weren't you?
I didn't know them, and I had no doubt to dispute that they were anything other than trusted.
Did you do anything to investigate whether what Tracy had told you was right in the light of this interview?
No, I didn't. I took it at face value, and as I said, it came in, I forget the time on the email, but it was all kind of back to back coming into this meeting.
It's at 4:59, I think, on the Monday, and on the Wednesday, and this is on the Thursday.
Yeah. So as I said, this wasn't my meeting. It was Kevin's meeting. He'd asked me to come in and support him. I thought more from an operational perspective, because I think Kevin did work in a branch at some point, but he didn't have the relevant and up-to-date experience that I had, and I thought that's why I was there. And then the email from Tracy came in very late, and I took that at face value. And I had no reason to doubt what Tracy was saying. I trust her in terms of her professionally, having worked with her a number of years since, mostly after this, but I had no reason to doubt what she said, or passed on anyway.
That's what's going around in my head. At 4:59, if I've got what Mr. Beer or you just said, you get information from her to the effect that in certain circumstances, Fujitsu can access the branch accounts. You have no reason to doubt what she's told you.
Yes.
The following day, you're being challenged about whether the post office can do the same, in effect. And you're saying unequivocally, no, they can't. But what you're not saying is, but even if it's only saying to yourself, as I understand you, but hang on a minute, Fujitsu can do this, so shouldn't I be looking at that?
So what I didn't do in this meeting, and I accept, is I didn't volunteer that information, but I have said...
Why is that?
So I think this, for me, I wasn't really, from my understanding, on solid ground, because I hadn't talked to anybody about it. I took it at face value. I didn't understand the technical aspects, and therefore I was relaying. Kevin was the more senior person. He'd obviously been involved in those discussions with Tracy, and I was basically answering some of the questions. Mark had said somebody in Fujitsu can, and I basically accepted by saying, but not without being seen to have done that, Mark, which is what Tracy had said.
Thank you. That can come down. Can I move forwards a number of years to the evidence that you gave in the Horizon Issues trial? And I should say immediately that I'm going to leave the question of your role in the build-up to the trial and your role in the group litigation generally to others to ask questions about, and in every other respect, the evidence that you gave to others to ask questions about, and the findings that Mr. Justice Fraser made to others to ask you questions about. This is the only thing I'm going to ask you about. Can we look, please, at FUJ 0016 3744? Can you see that this is the 18th of March 2019 in the High Court, and this is a transcript of the evidence that you gave?
Yes.
Yes? And if we go forwards, please, to page 53. And you're being asked questions here by Mr. Green, Patrick Green, King's Counsel, on behalf of the claimants. And he's asking you about a witness statement you made in November 2018, if we just scroll down. And he says, and you made this witness statement in November 2018. This was something you were aware of when you made this witness statement, isn't it? And you say yes, i.e. the possibility of inserting transactions. And you say the possibility, but I've never actually seen this happen. The possibility of it, yes. And he says, how long have you known about that possibility? I.e., that's the possibility of inserting transactions. You say, this is something I've not, because I've not experienced it myself. I've not known of it that long, actually. He asks, could you give the court a rough idea of how long you've known it was possible? And you say, in terms of inserting transactions, the last year or so. Question, who told you about it? Over the page. And you say Fujitsu. Yes? So just go back to the bottom of that page. You're telling the court that the first time you knew of the possibility of inserting transactions was in the last year.
Or so, yes.
That was false, wasn't it?
Well, at the time, I didn't think it was.
No, that was false, wasn't it?
So, if I can just explain. So, what had been happening in post office was there was the message on remote access kept changing. So we would ask, so there'd be some information that said, you know, there were claims of this happening, and then we'd get pushback that it didn't happen. And coming into the GLO, we were still asking questions of Fujitsu and still getting changing messages. So from me, this was about the balancing transaction, which was the first formal recognition I knew of inserting a transaction, other than the legacy system. But it was the balancing transaction that I since learned had been used in March 2010. So when I answered the question, that's what I had in my head, which was, and that was, I couldn't remember the date, and I still don't know the date, but it was leading into the trial that I became aware that that was actually something that had happened.
You've used the word formally and actually in the answer that you have just given. In what respect were the communications of December 2010 and January 2011, the latter of which you took at face value, not formal or actual communications of the position?
Because the position changed after that, from what I understand, is that we were asking, and I never actually spoke to Fujitsu myself about this, and I never actually spoke to the IT guys directly in terms of Andy McLean. Position was changing, and therefore, and there was very strong messaging coming from within Post Office that these things weren't possible. So it was only really when I had the balancing transaction information confirmed that really registered with me that that was the formal position, and there was evidence of that hadn't taken place in March 2020. March 2010.
You were suggesting here that you'd only come to know about Fujitsu's ability to insert transactions in mid-2018 or so.
So this,
i.e. in the last year or so, weren't you?
So that would have been about, going into, my recollection is coming into the GLO prep, so working that back about 2017 would have been my recollection, but I couldn't put a date on it. And I still can't put a date on the balancing transaction.
So why didn't you say, well, hold on, I got this, I was told about it in December 2010? Or January 2011?
Because I think at that, as I say, at that point, the messaging had been changing.
Well, I'm not that concerned about messaging, I'm more interested in the facts.
That was my recollection at the time, that it was the balancing transaction that, for me, was that formal recognition from Fujitsu that could be done. Just
by way of side issue at the moment, in paragraph 200, that can come down, in paragraph 223 of your witness statement, you say that you recall discussions between the Post Office legal team and possibly the Post Office IT team, Fujitsu and Gareth Jenkins, in the course of the preparation for the civil litigation, but you were not involved in those discussions, and therefore you can't assist as to the extent to which Fujitsu or Mr. Jenkins provided assistance in the group litigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you confirm that you had no contact with either Mr. Jenkins or Fujitsu in relation to the provision of the witness statement that you gave in the High Court?
So I think there was only two. I think there might have been two, but there was. So I spoke to Gareth about the lepton issues. At the time, the Helen Rose was looking at that.
So that was back when the events were happening, not in preparation for the GLO. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. Although the Helen Rose report was part of the GLO, so I don't remember if I spoke to Gareth again about that.
Sorry, to be clear, you can't remember whether you spoke to Mr. Jenkins again.
Yeah, I don't
preparation.
think I did. I mean, I don't know Gareth Jenkins. I've not met him. There was some email correspondence I definitely remember, and I think I might have spoken to him maybe once or maybe twice, but I don't remember the detail. So I had some correspondence with him about lepton issue, but I think that was previously, and I'm not sure if I spoke to him about the Angela Burke information. I don't remember if I spoke to him directly or not.
Did you ever meet with Gareth Jenkins?
No, I've never met Gareth Jenkins.
You say that in your evidence under cross-examination in the Horizon Issues trial. Just for the note, Fujitsu 0016-3744 at page 25. In paragraph 214 of your witness statement, if we turn that up, please, which is on page 101. Please. Paragraph 214, you're dealing with your common issues witness statement here, and you say in the second line, for the most part, this was derived from my own knowledge.
Yes.
Some of which will have been drawn from documents you've read over the years. And so that wasn't derived from any conversations you had with Mr. Jenkins at that time?
Sorry, what? Sorry, Mr.
The contents of your common issues statement.
So most of my common issues statement was more broadly about the post office and how it operated.
Yes. And then what about the Horizon Issues witness statement? Any of that derived from communications with
I don't believe
or conversations with Mr. Jenkins?
I don't think I had a conversation. I can't remember, but I don't believe I spoke to Gareth.
Okay, thank you. That can come down. For the group litigation, were you asked to participate in any disclosure exercise?
No. Not that I remember.
So you weren't asked to look at your emails?
Oh,
to turn up, for example, the email of the 5th of December or the email of the 5th of January?
No. So I think the disclosure exercise was done set within the business and everything was pulled that way. I don't remember being asked to go back and look at anything or to search on my particular laptop for anything.
Did you yourself go back and look at your emails or other document repositories so that you could consider your state of knowledge on the issues relevant to the Horizon Issues trial for the purposes of preparing either your witness statement or your oral evidence?
No.
So you didn't think, I'm going to be asked about Horizon Integrity, I should look at my email account to see what I have received over time about Horizon Integrity so I can give straightforward and open evidence?
I never searched back. I don't remember the December emails, and I wouldn't have even known where to look for that because I don't even remember receiving them. And the Ferndown interview really was, for me, it was less about the Horizon Integrity and the remote access. It was more about that supporting Kevin in that meeting, and it was about the relationship reset. So I didn't, going into the two trials, I didn't search through my emails regarding that, and I would have forgotten about those emails anyway. But I said I don't even remember having the one from John.
Isn't that the reason that if you're giving evidence in an important case to the High Court on oath, you might conduct an exercise in self-reflection and say, I'm going to check my emails, see what I knew when?
I wish I had, but I didn't.
So you maintain that the emails that we've looked at of December 2010 and the 5th of January 2011 were not either shown to you by solicitors preparing your witness statement or found by you as part of an evidence readying session?
Yes, I don't remember. I mean, it was only coming into this exercise that I remembered the Ferndown having been involved in it at all.
Did you conduct any exercise of self-reflection on what you knew about the live issues in the Horizon Issues trial? Search your own diaries, search your own email inbox and sent items. Look through any notes that you may have made.
For the Horizon trial?
Yes.
So the most content for the Horizon trial is I pulled from the investigations that my team had done in the cases. I didn't do any searches on my my laptop. And in terms of my diary, not that I can recall.
And why not?
I don't know, because I didn't think it was relevant in terms of information I was given. I just didn't give it a thought, and nobody suggested at all to me that was something I should be doing.
When giving evidence today in preparation, you seem to have researched whether the 5th of December was a Sunday or not.
Yes.
Why didn't you give that care and attention to the previous occasions when you gave evidence?
So I think the difference with this inquiry approach is I had a list of documents to review, I had a list of questions to consider, and I did research that really well as far as I could. That was a very different approach to when I gave evidence in the two trials. And I think looking back and coming into this, I've come into this with knowing what more to expect, and I've made sure that I've familiarised myself with everything I've been provided with, and requested more information when I think there was more. I didn't have that same approach going into the two trials.
Can we go back then in time, still looking at remote access, and look at poll 0011 5919? This is a briefing note, as we can see, prepared for Paula Venables in relation to the second site review into Horizon, and in particular the implications of their interim report. It's draft and it's dated the 2nd of July 2013. If we look at the foot of page 2 for some context, please. I should say that this is all part of the background being briefed to Miss Venables. And at paragraph 7, it records that Susan Crichton, Leslie Sewell, Elwyn Lyons, you and Simon Baker met second site on the 1st of July at 3 p.m. to obtain a clearer picture of second site's interim findings and the timing for delivery. Yeah, so you've seen second site the day before this document.
Okay.
To work out what they're going to say, essentially, in their interim findings. Agreed?
I don't remember, but yes, it's there.
And if we go forwards, please, to page 4. under the heading "The Two Anomalies." The document says, we also understand second site interim report will discuss two anomalies in Horizon's operation. These were found by Post Office Limited and voluntarily communicated to second site, i.e. neither was identified by second site as part of its review. And then the first is badged up as the 62 branch anomaly. This is the receipts and payments mismatch bug, if you remember, the thing that was discussed at that meeting in the autumn of 2010, at which it had become apparent to 6 post office people, including Messrs Marwood, Tundall and Wynne, that remote access was possible and allowed Fujitsu to tamper with branch accounts without a sub-postmaster's knowledge. Then a summary is set out. It affects, if we just read the first part, A, it affects 62 branches, concerns the receipts and payments mismatch in Legacy Horizon, in Horizon Online, when discrepancies were moved into the local suspense account. Appeared first in March 2010. Majority of incidents occurred between August and October 2010. The losses ranged from those two amounts. Identified by Horizon's built-in checks and balances, could have been identified if the sub-postmaster had carefully scrutinised their final balance report. 17 branches were adversely affected. Sub-postmasters notified in March 2011 and, where appropriate, reimbursed. Sub-postmasters who made a gain through the anomaly were not asked to refund this. Predate separation would have been dealt with by Royal Mail Legal. And then sets out the reason for delaying notification to sub-postmasters. And then and then it continues on the 14 branch anomaly, which is something else. Yes?
Yes.
Who was responsible for this summary of the 62 branch anomaly?
I think it was Simon Baker that pulled that together.
Did you contribute towards this?
No.
Did you read it before it was submitted to Miss Bennells?
I don't recall. I don't remember seeing that before. But I can't be sure.
Do you know why it doesn't pick up, in this context, the remote access issue?
No.
Do you know why it doesn't reference what you knew as a result of the December 2010 email and the January 2011 email?
As I said, I don't remember the December 2010 anyway. But no. I just don't remember this at all. So Simon was pulling this together, if I remember correctly. Simon was part of the IT and change space, and Simon would have been best placed to have that information. But I'm sorry, I can't answer anything further than that.
Can we move on then to 2014, please, and look at poll 0030 4439. And start by looking, please, at page 3. There's an email in 2014, the 10th of April 2014, from you to Andrew Wynne and Alan Lusher. So by this time, I think you were head of partnerships, is that right? Yes, we can see that on the footer. The mediation scheme's up and running now. Yes, Second Site's produced its report. And you say to Alan and Andy, as part of a mediation scheme case submission. The applicant is referring to an email, a copy of which I'm trying to track down. You have been mentioned in respect of this email, quote, with the Andy Wynne Alan Lusher email in the case of Ward, which explicitly states that Fujitsu can remotely change the figures in branches without the sub-postmaster's knowledge or authority. And you asked them, as a matter of urgency, to send you a copy of that email, associated emails, and any other associated information. So you're asking them for a copy of the Wynne-Lusher email, essentially, yes?
Yes, that's right.
Can we look, please, at the Wynne-Lusher email? Poll 00107650. Poll 00117650. Foot of the page, please. Scroll down a bit, please. Thank you. Mr. Lusher to Mr. Wynne. I spoke to you a few days ago about a suspension at Rivenhall. Over the page. Got a good understanding of the problem. Skip the next paragraph. Mr. Ward, the sub-postmaster, raised one, that on a number of occasions, figures have appeared in the check line of his account. He suspects these have been input into his account electronically without his knowledge or consent. He's certain he has cleared and remmed out checks in the correct way, and he tells me that checks must be properly cleared on the system to progress to a new account. He's made good about £10,000 and has not made good about £11,000 of the shortages. He claims that because of the abnormal nature of these entries, the shortages have just not rolled over from one branch trading statement to another. Sub-postmaster's contract remains suspended. And then the reply on page 1, please. The only way scroll up, please. The only way that the post office can impact branch accounts remotely is via the transaction correction process. These have to be accepted by the branch in the same way that in-out remittances are, I guess. If we were able to do this, the integrity of the system would be flawed. Fujitsu have the ability to impact branch records via the message store, but have extremely rigorous procedures in place to prevent adjustments being made without prior authorization within Post Office and Fujitsu. These controls form the core of our court defence if we get to that stage. He, that's the sub-postmaster, makes a casual accusation that's extremely serious to the business. As usual, he should either produce the evidence for this or withdraw the accusation. Can you see that?
Yes.
So that's the email that you're after, yes?
Correct.
Can we go, please, back to poll 00304439? And if we scroll down to page 2, please. Bottom of the page. Angela, please find attached an email which may be the one referred to. I believe it is that email that we've just referred to. I've records of a significant number of documents, etc. Would you like me to send everything to you? Top of the page. Thanks for sending this email through, very helpful. And so in 2014, you were being told as well, that can come down, thank you, that remote access by Fujitsu was possible.
From Andy Wynne's note, yes.
Did you reveal that to the High Court when you gave evidence?
Don't believe I did.
Did you forget about this email too?
So I think I've raised that internally to get to the bottom of it, but I can't recall. But
You told the High Court that you only learned about the facility to insert transactions about a year before giving evidence. So far, we've looked at the December 2010, the January 2011, and now an April 2014 series of emails that are telling you about that facility. Agreed?
as I've said, the balancing transaction was the first formal notification that I recall being made aware of. Before that, there were a number of, and you're quite right, the emails, but I have, and the Andy Wynne, I did something, I can't remember exactly what, in terms of getting under the skin of that, because there just seemed to be a number of almost throwaway lines on Horizon integrity or things like that that just weren't being evidenced. And it was the balancing transaction for me that was the first time it was proof that that did exist and it had actually been used. So I'm not sure exactly. I mean, when I gave my evidence to the trials, it was on the basis of what I understood to be true at the time. There will be, like December 2010, as I said, I didn't remember, and there are things I will have forgotten about, but there are things that have moved on from some of the information that's being shown. I just can't remember exactly what the outcome of that was.
So might we take our second morning break there, please?
Yeah.
Can I just check the time precisely? Can we reconvene at 25 past, please?
Yeah, certainly. And will you give some thought to then going on until, say, about 1:15? Because if we only have one break in the afternoon, it's probably better if we have a slightly later lunch.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Fine.
Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Ms. Madam Bogerd, we were looking at the email exchange of the 10th of April 2014, where you were tracking down a copy of the Wynne-Lusher email exchange.
Yes.
Can we look, please, at poll 00304478? And if we look at the first page, we can see we're now on the 9th of May, and there is a whole chain sent to you by Andrew Parsons. Yes?
Yes.
If we can look at the chain, please, to see what it contained, and start on page 6, please. And if we scroll to the bottom, please, we'll see an email from Roderick Williams of the 14th of April to James Davidson of Fujitsu. Yes?
Yes.
James, could Fujitsu please answer the questions below so that we can respond to a specific challenge put to us by Second Sight in connection with a mediation complaint? Quote, the Wynne-Lusher email in the case of Ward explicitly states that Fujitsu can remotely change the figures in the branches without the sub-postmaster's knowledge or authority, and he attaches the Wynne-Lusher email. The part of the email in question is, over the page, Fujitsu have the ability to impact branch records via the message store, but have extremely rigorous procedures in place to prevent adjustments being made without prior authorization. Within Post Office and Fujitsu's, these controls form the core of our court defence if we get to that stage. And then Mr. Williams sets out a series of questions. Can the Post Office change transaction data without a sub-postmaster being aware of the change? Can Fujitsu do so? If not, where is the evidence for this conclusion? If so, how does it happen? Why was this functionality built in? Why would Fujitsu need to use this functionality? What controls are in place to prevent unauthorized use of this method of access? When has branch data been accessed in this way? In relation to the Wynne-Lusher email, what is the message store? Can it be used to access and change branch accounts? What's the impact of this change on branch accounts? Would the sub-postmaster be aware of the change? Why would this method of access be used? What controls are in place to prevent misuse of this method of access? All penetrating questions. Do you agree?
Yes.
And they necessarily arise from the 2 lines in the Win Lusher email that we've seen. They're logical questions that arise from it. And can we go, please, to page 4? Halfway down the page, Mr. Davidson of Fujitsu replies to Mr. Williams. Please see the response below. And then if we go to 2, that's it. Can Fujitsu change branch transaction data without a sub-postmaster being aware of the change? Answer, once created, branch transaction data cannot be changed. And then this, only additional data can be inserted. If this is required, the additional transactions will be visible on the trading statements, but would not require acknowledgement or approval by a sub-postmaster. The approval is given by Post Office via the change process. In response to a previous query, Fujitsu checked last year when this was done on Horizon Online, and we found only one occurrence in March 2010, which was early in the pilot for Horizon Online and was covered by an appropriate change request. For old Horizon, a detailed examination of archived data would have to be undertaken to look into this across the lifetime of use. This would be a significant and complex exercise to undertake and discussed previously with the Post Office, but discounted as too costly and impractical. And then he gives a series of answers that I'm not going to read out to Mr. Williams' questions 4A to E and 5A to F. Then can we go, before we move on from that, you would agree that this is Fujitsu saying that Fujitsu can insert branch transaction data?
Yes.
And this is Fujitsu saying that Fujitsu, could do so without approval by a sub-postmaster?
Yes, they're referring to the balancing transaction, although they've not specifically said that here.
You think this is all about balancing transactions, essentially?
I think so, yes.
Can we go to page 2, please? Foot of the page. Mr. Williams says he's producing a first draft of the note, noting that he's intentionally not referred to the Win Lusher email as it distracts from what is otherwise a very clear picture. He hopes this will put the matter to bed and the matter need not be escalated to the working group. Yes?
Yeah.
And then page 1, please. That whole chain is provided to you. And the interim or the proposed interim answer to Second Sight's question as to whether it is possible for anyone to access Horizon Online and amend transaction data without the knowledge of the sub-postmaster or their staff. Second line, there's no functionality in the Horizon system, either through a front-end terminal or back-end server to edit or delete transaction data once it's been transmitted from a branch to the central branch data center. This is encrypted, transferred to the branch data center and stored in a separate audit server where they're sealed using industry standard secure protocols to ensure the data's integrity. Although it's possible to input additional transactions into a branch's accounts, the sub-postmaster will always have visibility of these extra transactions as they're shown separately in the branch accounts. A more detailed note will follow. Did you approve this holding response and pass it to Second Sight?
I didn't approve it.
Why was it being sent to you?
To pass on. But,
Sorry?
To pass on, I think.
To Second Sight?
I think so. Because I tended to be passing things on to Second Sight at the time for the report.
Can you keep your voice up, please?
Sorry. I tended to be passing things on to Second Sight at the time. for their information. But just going back to what this doesn't say, it doesn't mention balancing transaction. Looking at this now, this should have mentioned balancing transaction.
You're ahead of me of the things that it fails to mention.
Sorry.
It fails to set out that Fujitsu had confirmed that Fujitsu could insert additional transaction data outside of transaction corrections, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And that didn't require the approval or acknowledgement of the sub-postmaster. It doesn't say that either, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It failed to inform Second Sight that the Post Office could not address the extent of any use of remote access in legacy Horizon, something that had been used for 10 years, because a detailed examination of archived data was needed, and that would be costly and impractical. It doesn't say that, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Can you explain why the Post Office chose not to include those 3 pieces of information?
I don't know. I mean, it says a more detailed note will follow, but it won't be ready before the fact file. But on the basis, I don't know what further work Andy expected to be done on this, because just reading, what we've just gone through, even though James Davison, I think it was, wasn't it, didn't actually mention balancing transaction by name. That is what I took from reading this. But at the time, I wouldn't have known about a balancing transaction. It's just that I know about that subsequently. And it should have been put into this. And I think I've just forwarded this on to Second Sight, as that's our position at the moment, expecting there's something else to follow, but I don't know what.
Do you agree that the answer that has been drafted by Mr. Parsons, by comparison to the information provided by Fujitsu, is materially incomplete?
Yes.
Can we move on, please, to poll 309-1394? Can we start with page 2, please? We're in October 2014 now. We just look at the footer page at 1 to get the context. An email from Jessica Parker to a wide range of people, including you. It's about one of the cases that has been referred to mediation, yes?
Yes.
MO53. Second Sight have released a revised version of their draft CRR for MO53. Can you remember what CRRs were?
Case review report, so that's Second Sight's investigation into the scheme applications.
So it's essentially a draft of what Second Sight propose to say about an individual case, is that right?
That's correct.
Just read the rest of that to yourself, because it's not completely material. If we go back to page 1, please. Middle of the page. Belinda Crow, what role was she performing in late 2014?
So Belinda was the Programme Director for Project Sparrow. She also was the Secretariat for the working group, the scheme working group.
And she asked the question, is this the first, i.e. the first CRR, which references remote access? I think we need to pick this up very robustly in our response, as this could become public. And Second Sight seem to be asking for proof that something didn't happen. Could we dust off our lines on this? And then if we scroll up the page, please. Melanie Caulfield, late 2014, what role was she performing?
She was part of the comms team.
So a media and communications
Yes.
expert or professional.
Yes.
She replies to the same group, including you. Our current line, if we're asked about remote access being used to change branch data or transactions, is simply, this is not and never has been possible. You knew that was false from multiple sources by now, didn't you?
Yes, because what we've just seen was injecting transactions in the branch balancing transaction.
We've got the 2010 email that you don't recall. We've got the January 2011. We've got the earlier exchanges in April and May 2014. That first statement, this is not and has never been possible, is false.
Well, she's talking about change in branch data. Yeah, I think it's a stretch. I mean, I'm talking about inserting a transaction. I'm not sure what. I mean, that's what it says, change branch data and transactions.
You wouldn't want a post office line to dance on the head of a pin, would you?
No, I wouldn't.
Which I think is what you were doing a moment ago, weren't you?
I'm just trying to...
Contemplating the possibility that because this doesn't refer to injecting new data.
I suppose I'm just trying to rationalise why, that's been said when what we've just come out of is the balancing transaction information.
It continues. This line holds. But if we're pressed regarding Second Sight's points about admitting there's remote access, we can say there is no remote access for individual branch transactions. You knew that was false as well from multiple sources, didn't you?
Sorry, do you mind? Can we just... So the James Davison email, what date was on that?
Davidson email was 9th of May.
2014?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, your original question was I knew this was false.
Yes, you knew that line, there is no remote access for individual branch transactions.
On the back of the email from James Davison, and clearly I was aware of that, and I just didn't pick this up.
Ms Caulfield continues, we might get pushed further on it and be asked by media to confirm whether or not there's any remote access. We'll need to make the distinction, re-access, as straightforward as we can, so suggest there's no remote access for individual branch transactions. Fujitsu has support access to the back end of the system used for software updates and maintenance. This, of course, is strictly controlled with security processes in place, but could not in any event be used for individual branch transactions. There is no facility at all within the system for this. You knew that was false as well, didn't you?
I didn't. It didn't register with me at the time, but obviously from what we've discussed, and this is incorrect in terms of a flow of information, yes.
So the three lines, which seem to be a main line in paragraph 1, an if pressed line in paragraph 2, and then if really pushed in paragraph 3, all three of them contain statements which you knew to be false, didn't they?
Although I didn't recognise at the time, yes.
Did you do anything to correct these three false lines to take?
I don't remember. But I note that we've got Rod and Andy Parsons on here as well. So I don't remember if anything else came out of this.
Well, Mr. Parsons' time will come in due course. I'm asking you at the moment.
Sorry, my answer was I don't remember.
Well, can you help us? We've seen a slew of emails now that informed you in one way or another of the facility of Fujitsu remotely to access individual transactions in branch accounts and change them by inserting data. Why wouldn't you put your hand up and say, hold on, this is all wrong, what we're proposing to say?
I just can't recall. To me, it couldn't have registered with me in terms of the flow of information that had gone before. as I said, the messaging was constantly changing, but on the back of the James Davidson email, I think that, which had come from Fujitsu, other information had come from within the business or from different sources, but that had come from Fujitsu, and therefore that for me should have been registering as that, and notwithstanding the note that Andy put together, but it should have been registering that that is what Fujitsu was saying could happen, which is the balancing transaction.
If we just scroll down a little bit. Thank you. Belinda Crow says, I think we need to pick this up. That's the suggestion of remote access very robustly in our response, as this could become public. Is that the reason why you didn't pick any of this up and say, hold on, there are 3 false statements? The only statements we're proposing to make are each false.
No.
Because the business wanted to respond robustly.
I wouldn't have. It just didn't register. If it had registered with me, I would have challenged it, because we had one of the applicants to the scheme, which is what's triggered all of this anyway. That was already in the public domain, because we were not openly in the public domain, but we were already dealing with that. So if that's what our position should have been, then we should have been saying that. And I just must have missed it.
Well, it's you and quite a lot of other people, isn't it?
In terms of who else have missed it, is that what you're saying? Mm. Yeah, and I just...
Well, is it a case of everyone missing it? Or is it that the overriding objective is to defend very robustly the position that there is no remote access?
That was never my position. I mean, if... I came into the scheme originally at the start to get under the skin of was there any substance in the claims, and I took that role on voluntarily on top of the day job I was doing at the time, because I really wanted to understand. There is no way that if I'd thought there was something in that I would have. I was certainly not trying to cover up or suppress or do anything along those lines, and that's the bit I'm struggling with, because it wasn't just me. There are other people being party to the same information at that point.
Thank you. That can come down. Can we move forward to the next year then, 2015, still dealing with remote access, and look at poll 0008 9010. Give me a moment whilst I catch up with my paper. This is, as you can see at the top, a briefing for you in relation to an internal film, Re-Panorama. It relates, to give you some context, to the BBC Panorama episode that was called, quote, Trouble at the Post Office. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And that was eventually aired on the 17th of August, 2015.
Yes.
But the document itself isn't dated, but it was sent, we can tell from other evidence, to you by Mel Caulfield by email on the 18th of June 2015.
Okay.
Okay. If we just familiarise ourselves with it, because I don't think we've seen this before. Background: a film for use through internal channels throughout the business to deliver key messages and facts about allegations likely to be made in the BBC Panorama programme. Be alongside and supplemented by the full internal communications plan, currently in development. Although an internal film, it will of course be in public, so available to external audiences. It will be 3 to 5 minutes of hard-hitting questions and answer session between you and Kim Fletcher from Brunswick. Brunswick are media and public relations consultancy.
Yes.
And so this was going to be a Q&A where Brunswick, the media and comms people, put questions, hard-hitting questions to you.
Yes.
And you answered them. And this was intended for internal consumption principally, is that right?
That was the intention, yes.
Whilst we will focus on some key rebuttals regarding the content of Panorama, this messaging should likely address concerns or questions from a network perspective, so people feel confident, read the Post Office position, reassured regarding the system, and importantly, they're being kept well informed. We'll include some signposting to other communication materials. We appreciate your guidance about the messaging for the network on this subject. Panorama, you'll have seen the latest email sent on Friday. Theme appears to be an allegation of a potential miscarriages of justice through inappropriate conduct by the Post Office, especially regarding alleged pressure, in inverted commas, on postmasters to plead guilty to false accounting. Focusing on 3 criminal cases, Joe Hamilton, Noel Thomas and Seema Misra, aspects of which they are likely to attempt to, quote, illustrate wider allegations, and which will, of course, supply significant, quote, human interest. The key aspect of this will likely be allegations to try and create the perception that people were prosecuted for, quote, getting in a muddle and for the recovery of money. They're likely to refer heavily to Second Sight's reports throughout, quote, as evidence. They're likely to have contributors who will continue to, quote, cast doubts about Horizon through, quote, technical opinions, supposed revelations, end quote, about aspects of the system, highly likely to include at least one stunt in the programme, and could well be on the subject of alleged remote access. But indications are there'll also be selectively leaked material that will be used out of context. They're likely to include allegations that the Post Office has not run the mediation scheme fairly and has hampered it to avoid the risk of compensation. I'm not going to read the rest of that page. Can we go to page 3, please? The key messages. And would you understand these are the key messages for you to get out?
As this is written, yes.
Number 1, this is about missing money, which we have a duty to protect. Trust is vital. We have a duty to protect the money in our branches. If cash goes missing and this is covered up, we must investigate and act on this. We don't prosecute people for making mistakes. We never have and we never will. Prosecutions are very rare and only ever in the light of all the available evidence and circumstances. Then the second key message, we do not control the legal process. If we do prosecute, this is done with numerous checks and balances, ultimately scrutinised by defence lawyers and the courts themselves. We do not bring charges or prosecute without evidence, and we do not pressure anyone regarding their plea to a charge. The decision to plead guilty or not guilty is always one for the defendant only, having taken advice. Criminal cases are kept under continual review. That's our absolute duty. In none of our investigations, nor through that of the independent accountants, has any evidence emerged to suggest a conviction is unsafe. I'm going to come back to that this afternoon. Such matters cannot be assessed in the media on partial, often inaccurate information, nor should it be in any circumstances. Those 2 messages, this is all about missing money stolen by sub-postmasters, and we, the Post Office, don't control the legal process. It's defence lawyers and the courts.
Yes.
Did you understand in mid-2015 they were the key messages that the Post Office wished to get out?
I hadn't seen it all put together in one place, but given that this was put together as a briefing document for me, then yes.
The third key message is there's nothing wrong with the computer system. So before I ask you about that, if we just scroll up, please. And again. This is all about missing money that we've got a duty to protect. We heard evidence earlier this week from Susan Crichton, the General Counsel of the Post Office. and she told the chairman that you were amongst a group of people who had been in the post office for a very long time, who held the view that this was public money that was being stolen. It needed to be protected and it needed to be recovered through prosecutions. Is that correct?
In terms of taxpayers' money, I was always made aware that this is taxpayers' money when I came into the post office, so that was a consideration, and therefore we had a duty to protect it and make sure that we had the right checks in place. Recovery through prosecution, that wouldn't have been on my radar at all. So it was really about, from an operational perspective, just having the consideration, and it was always a consideration actually, that this is taxpayers' money. And not just in the context of Sub Postmaster, but as a business as a whole.
Ms. Crichton held the view, or seemed to hold the view, that there was a group of people who were particularly long-serving, which group included you, that emphasised this point, rather than it just being a fact or matter, as you've described it today, that is part of the background. Is it something that you emphasise, that this is public money that we've got a duty to protect?
No, I don't ever remember doing that. As I said, I had been in the business a long time. I started working in branch, and it was always part of the consideration that we are we were shareholder was government, but we were in that kind of quasi state where we were required to make a profit as well. But we should have consideration for the taxpayers' money, but not against, as if it was a real emphasis against anything else. It wasn't the be-all and end-all, is what I'm trying to say. It was a consideration. And I don't ever remember emphasising that to Susan or anybody else. I mean, Kevin was network. He'd been in the business, I think, longer than me, actually. And there would be other people in the network that would have been in as long as me or even longer. But I don't remember ever it being emphasised, but it was a consideration.
There wasn't a cabal of long-serving, up through the ranks, started off as counter-clerks or similar, who held the belief this was just subbies with their hands in the till?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, my position, I'd worked very closely with postmasters for a number of years. And, I said on a number of occasions into the organisation where people did think postmasters had their hand in the till, is that, in my view, postmasters were hard-working, honest, decent people, and they didn't come into the post office to defraud. That wasn't why they came into the post office. It was quite the opposite. They came in to serve the communities that they lived within.
Can we go back to the third key message at the foot of the page? There's nothing wrong with the computer system. We've never said Horizon is perfect or infallible. It's a computer system, so of course things can go wrong. But this is all about facts, not theories. And there's not a single example of Horizon causing losses in any of the cases we've examined exhaustively during the past few years. I've gone through these cases, every single one, and I've looked at all the facts. That means all the facts, not just Horizon records. Over the page. What we found, and what the independent accountants reviewing the cases have found, is that the majority of losses were down to human error, and some were regrettably down to dishonesty. We cannot get away from that. Is that what you thought the outcome of the initial investigation by Second Sight and the mediation scheme was?
Well, our investigations didn't find there was any evidence that the losses were caused by Horizon system, and that is what Second Sight concluded as well. And some of it would have been the majority of losses. I can't remember that we ever pointed to dishonesty, but it would have been one of the potential outcomes of the investigations. But I think just going back to this is a brief that's been put together for me. I can't remember what we did as a result of this, because I did try and get some further disclosure to say, did we film? Because I don't remember. Certainly, film didn't go out. But in having a brief prepared for me, I would have then, if I was going to use this, I would have fine-tuned it to, one, how I speak, and if there's any corrections in the facts, then I would have corrected it.
Can we go forward to page 7, please? And scroll down to that main heading, second site's evidence. This is part of the briefing which addresses the main allegations that Ms Caulfield believed would be made by Panorama and the suggested replies. Second site's evidence that remote access to branch data is possible in spite of post office denials. Reply, this is about facts, not theories. There's been a lot of inaccurate things said in the media about remote access, but there's not a single example in these cases of Horizon causing losses, whether through remote tampering or anything else. Most important point sometimes gets lost in the technical explanations. Once a transaction is recorded by the branch, it cannot be changed remotely. Everything that happens leaves a footprint. So there's an audit trail that shows every keystroke, every transaction, everything that's happened. We've looked at all that. Of course, we have transaction corrections and acknowledgements and the other tools needed to make sure that branches can stay in balance. But these must be accepted by the branch, and they do not make changes to the original transactions themselves. They're recorded separately. The system's independently audited, monitored and managed, and meets or exceeds industry accreditations. Irrespective of the state of post office knowledge, would you accept that this response to the allegation regarding remote access does not actually address whether remote access is possible?
No, it doesn't. I mean, this is, I think you said this was 2015, isn't it? June 2015?
Oh, yes, 18th of June 2015.
Yeah, okay. No, it's kind of skirts around things.
It sidesteps it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Do you know why it sidesteps it?
I think this is because it's been put together by a comms person.
Why would a comms person want to sidestep
I'm not
the
necessarily,
main allegation?
So I'm not necessarily saying that they would want to do that or intended to do that. It's just that if I'd written this myself, I would have used different language and would have pointed to different things. Because in the mix of all of this, we had the scheme case, that was the Bracknell issue that Ron and Ian had been trying to get to the bottom of and hadn't. So there were issues in the scheme that we were dealing with. So this is different. I would have written this differently.
By mid-2015, was it the Post Office's position that it's best to avoid answering directly the question of whether remote access was possible, because it will open us up to greater scrutiny?
I don't believe so, because we did an interview with Panorama around this time as well. A meeting that we had taped, so slightly different language that we used in that. So I don't know. So to answer your question, no, I don't think it was.
Lastly, on the issue of remote access, then, in your witness statement, it's paragraph 161, you say that you were engaged with sub-postmasters regarding investigation issues in the mediation scheme, any business-as-usual queries, and other general queries within Post Office relating to sub-postmasters, and where concerns related to remote access issues, the Post Office had a pre-approved wording for what you were to say. Yes?
Yes.
Can we look, please, to the documents you refer to as the pre-approved wording of what you were to say? Poll 302-2659. It's an email from Amy Prime of Bond Dickinson, then a trainee, to amongst others, you, in July 2016. Please find attached the revised remote access wording for your review. We shall provide any comments which Council may have on this wording in due course. This appears to be being provided in the context of the response to the letter of claim. Is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
So the people who were to become the GLO claimants had written through three solicitors a letter of claim.
Yes.
And this is part of the process by which the reply to that was being constructed. Is that right? You, in your witness statement, said that the Post Office had a pre-approved wording of what you were to say to sub-postmasters or within the mediation scheme or within any business as usual questions about remote access. Are you saying that this document that we're about to look at had been developed by the Post Office before it was distributed on the 27th of July 2016?
No, I'm not saying that. What I was trying to do on a witness statement is kind of give a flavour of the strong messaging that was coming from Paul over my time in terms of Horizon and the remote access. So no, I'm not saying that in regard to this.
Can we look at the attachment, please, which is poll 302 to 665? As we can see that it's a rider, i.e. something to slot into the response to the letter of claim. Response to the factual allegation that Horizon does not record transactions accurately and or the Post Office has been manipulating Horizon data. You'll see what is set out. I'm not going to, given the time, read through it. Are you saying that we should understand that what's set out in here was pre-approved wording by Post Office of what you were to say before this document was produced?
No, I'm not. Sorry, no, I didn't mean that, and apologies if that's how it's been taken. But this document and the information within the document will have and did pull from information within the organisation that we'd had over time and had been sense checked. And I think, if I remember this correctly, there was further sense checking that needs to be done on the back of this note. So I don't think this was the absolute final version, but it wasn't pre-approved wording, but it's something that the information that come from within the organisation.
Can we just look at your witness statement then, please, at page 80? Page 80, and paragraph 161 at the bottom. You say, in respect of concerns raised by sub-postmasters from 2012 onwards, I would have normally been the person to engage with sub-postmasters, for example, investigating issues raised as part of the scheme, dealing with business as usual queries, those raised outside the scheme and after the scheme had closed, and dealing with general queries that related to sub-postmasters. And then this, where concerns related to remote access issues, the Post Office had pre-approved wording of what we were to say. For example, C, and you cross-reference the two documents I've just shown you, which confirms the approved wording as at July 2016. You've told us already that what we see in the July 2016 document is not the approved wording that would have been given before then.
Yes.
So where are these approved wordings from the Post Office that were given from 2012 onwards as to what you were to say as to remote access?
So that would have been in the comms messaging.
What do you mean by that?
So,
Ms. van der Bogerd, we've looked at a series of direct emails to you setting out what was said to you about remote access from 2010 onwards. You appear to be suggesting here that the Post Office was, by contrast, giving you pre-approved wordings of what to say. And I'm asking, where are they, the pre-approved wordings?
So what I'm trying to say is, so there's the information that we've walked through today, this morning, some of which I remember, some which I don't, and I think I've said that. And then what there was a constant messaging from the business around remote access and Horizon, and this is, these are the lines that have been approved by the business for us to use. So there was this constant use of messaging around what we should say, and so that it's consistent. But what we've seen here, obviously, in terms of the way we've walked through this today, is the disconnect between a number of things that I've seen that I clearly haven't registered in terms of the messaging in parallel to that.
Is it that you didn't want to register the disconnect, as you put it?
No, absolutely not.
And that instead you were part of the messaging, weren't you? This wasn't something that was happening to you. It was something that was caused by you.
I don't think so. I don't have the technical expertise in IT, and therefore I was very much receiving a lot of this myself, which is why it hasn't registered on some of the occasion, and where it's been changed, the message has been changing because it's come from a different source. So I was absolutely not trying to massage this in any way, quite the opposite. But as I said, I've missed some stuff coming through here.
Can you point to a single email or other communication in which you correct any messaging which says there is no remote access or no remote access that a sub-postmaster will not know about?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes. Can you point to a single email or other communication from you which corrects messaging which says there is no remote access or no remote access about which a sub-postmaster will not know about?
I don't think so. I can't recall doing such an email.
So it's just gone 1:10. I'm about to move to another topic, namely bugs, errors and defects.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
Could we say 1:55, please?
Yeah, all right.
Thank you very much.